Hi, I'm Oscar Eustis, Artistic Director of the Public Theater in New York, and I'm here with Saheem Ali, who's the Associate Artistic Director of the Public Theater, and we are here getting ready to bring Shakespeare in the Park back. Saheem, what a fantastic thing.
I know.
Finally, after a year and a half almost,
So
we're going
long,
to gather together.
So long trying to figure out how to do it, and here we are. It's about to happen.
We can hear the birds.
I know.
This theater, the Delacorte, is a symbol of something that's much more than just the theater. Joe Papp started Free Shakespeare in the Park by the side of the Turtle Pond and got in a huge battle with the Commissioner of Parks of New York City, the most powerful man in New York City, Robert Moses, who tried to stop Free Shakespeare in the Park. He said, you have to charge for it. Joe refused to charge for it. It turned into a 6-month-long court battle. It was on the front pages of the newspapers. This is the late 1950s. And finally, the courts ruled in our favor. And Free Shakespeare in the Park has sat here ever since 1958.
Wow.
And, you know, in a sort of beautiful little anecdote, Moses then turned around after he lost and gave Joe the money to build this theater.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of great.
After fighting him.
If you stand for your ideals, it's amazing who comes on your
yeah,
side.
Yeah, you can transform people's ideas.
That's right. And so we have been doing Free Shakespeare, which, you know, for me, I think this is the perfect expression of democratic citizenship. Because just like the libraries, free lending libraries was a radical idea at one point, free theater is something that is equally dramatic in saying that the culture belongs to everybody. The culture shouldn't be something that you can buy or have to buy. It should be your birthright. It should be, and that birthright is what brings us all together and creates a common citizenship. So what's going to be happening here on July 6th, Saheem? What are you doing?
Oscar, we are getting the Merry Wives together.
Wow.
It's, as you know, like an extraordinary comedy.
Yeah.
Shakespeare just goes completely, he's just like radically raucous.
Yeah.
It's Falstaff, one of his most beloved comedic characters, puts him in his own play, puts these two women that he's trying to get with, and they get the better of him. And one of the things that's really extraordinary about it is how just unapologetically comedic it is,
Right,
you know?
right.
And the thing that I first, the thing that happened to me when I first read it was I started to hear these dialects. I started to hear these characters speaking in a West African dialect. Because for me, so many of the comedies that I grew up with in Africa, I grew up in Kenya, and we used to watch these Nollywood films. And so there was something very, very relatable to me about hearing these characters. And I remember this one scene where the wives get these letters from Falstaff, and I was like, oh, this would be really funny if it was in a braiding salon with these African women exchanging these letters. And so, you know, at the Public, we've just really been interested in expanding the idea of what Shakespeare is, who it's for, who can perform it, and the idea of a black cast, an immigrant African cast on the stage of the Delacorte, being funny, being raucous, being hilarious, you know. Just, it's a radical idea, because once upon a time, actors of colors were not allowed to be on stages, were not allowed to perform major roles, were relegated, were sidelined. And so it's always been a passion of mine to center actors of color, and it's something that the Public has been doing. James Earl Jones is one of the first actors of color on the stage of the Delacorte, you know? So I feel like what we're doing with this production is really expanding the notion of who can be on stage, who we're celebrating. And Oscar, you know, thinking about what we want to come back to this summer, we had these meetings with the staff where the staff said, we want something joyous, we want something fun, and we want something that celebrates the vitality that we have right now existing. And I think with Merry Wives, we're going to do something that's radical because of like who's up there, who we're celebrating, but it's also going to be joyous. It's going to be heartfelt. It's going to be something that we're going to, you know, the sound of laughter in these seats. I've missed being in the theater so much.
You know, I can't wait for that first preview when there's the first big laugh and everybody realizes they're laughing, which we've done in the last 14 months, but now they're not laughing alone. They're laughing with other people. Because one of the things I love about the theater in general, but certainly Free Shakespeare in the Park, is in a way we are here in order to create an audience. We're here in order to take the individual people who wander into theater and meld them together into a sense of themselves as a community. And a community that can laugh together is something we desperately need right now. So, Saheem, I know we've got these fantastic West and some East African accents on stage, but it's not set in Africa.
No, it's not. It's set right here in New York City. Because one of the things that felt important to us was to celebrate the city when we were coming back, after the pandemic. Theaters have been shut down in our glorious city for months and months and months, and theater is such an incredible, a vital part of the heartbeat of New York. And so it felt like a way to embrace both what's my identity being an African and the dialects that I was hearing, but also placing them here, because that's the story of New York, right? We have immigrant communities here who are here living their lives, and often their stories are about hardship, are about the strife, are about exclusion. And so it is a radical notion to put them on stage and say they're just being funny. It's just a comedy, and just allowing them to be three-dimensional human beings. So getting people from the Bronx, from up in Harlem, from Washington Heights to come and see people who look like them and sound like them on stage, I think it's going to be a really, really magical experience.
And people who look and sound like them doing Shakespeare.
Yes.
They're not only claiming the stage, they're claiming the greatest writer in the history of the English language as theirs. And that's, the thing that enraptured me about the public theater when I was a teenager and made me desire this job for my whole life till I got it, was the idea that the public theater is both radical and inclusive and also tremendously conservative, in that it says that these great achievements of the past, of the culture, need to be maintained, need to be preserved, but need to be preserved as our property, not as the property of the same class that owned them 400 years ago, but the property of everybody. And that's, to me, it's the promise of America, it's the promise of the theater, that everybody has a place, that everybody belongs together, and that we as a community, united, are stronger than any of us separated.
Yeah, and we want to reflect that on our stages as well.
That's right.
We want to show not only in our audiences in terms of who's coming here, but who gets to be on stage as well.
In the theater we use these metaphors, which people are in real life they're metaphors. For us they're literal. To put somebody center stage.
Yeah.
To put the spotlight on somebody. That's what we literally
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And it's why the stage is a fantastic place for letting people feel that they are the subjects of their own story. They aren't the subjects or objects of anybody else's story. It's their story they get to tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully that's a powerful thing.
I think so. It definitely has been powerful for me, Oskar, as someone who grew up in Africa, born and raised in Kenya. My first Shakespeare was a production of Romeo and Juliet that I was in when I was a teenager. Wow. And in that production, everyone was black. Everyone was black. And it wasn't extraordinary, it was ordinary. So when I came to America, and seeing people of color like on the sidelines or, in the chorus and not in center stage, like you've just said, except for the public theater, where I always came, because I noticed that, because I'm always looking for that, because I'm looking for myself on stage. And so the opportunity to come to the public, to talk to you about this production, to say, for us to say, let's do this, let's actually do something that hasn't been on the stage before and celebrate blackness and make it joyful, that is a radical thing. Yeah. It really is.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Shakespeare is, oddly able to take this kind of interpretation in a way that no other author is. And partly it's just he's the greatest author there ever was, so the plays can stand a great deal of reinterpretation. But I think part of it is because he was performing for the most democratic audience in Western theater history. He was, because of the Tudor Compromise, the people who were at the Globe Theater were illiterate groundlings, were Oxford and Cambridge graduates, were aristocrats. Every strata of society was present at the theater for the first time in 2,000 years. And Shakespeare had to write plays that spoke to all of them at once. So there's a kind of width and embrace in this.
That's interesting.
I think, Shakespeare could write, right?
Yeah.
That's not a good writer.
Yeah.
But I think it's that audience that turned him into the greatest writer in the history of the language. It was that audience that forced him to expand. Because when you've got an audience, to some extent, of course, you're showing people who are on stage being seen in the audience as that dialectic. But what you're also doing is you're showing everybody in the audience what they have in common with each other. And so for a play to work, everybody in the audience needs to feel like they're going through the story together.
Yeah.
And so it's a democratizing impulse in the theater.
Yeah, because you recognize the emotional, you empathize. We talk about empathy in the theater, right? What does it mean to have empathy? What does it mean to relate to someone who doesn't look like you, doesn't have your experience, but is going through something that you understand or you have been through.
That's right. Well, we've all been through a lot this year, and we are looking forward to July 6th, which is the first moment that we'll actually gather a community back here at the Delacorte for Free Shakespeare in the Park.
It's right around the corner.
Here it comes. Thanks for